Good morning, friends. It is Monday, day 117 of Russia's invasion into Ukraine, and there is hope. There is great reason for hope today. But the main stories today have to do with grain, have to do with gas, have to do with logistics. And so we're going to dive into some things. We're going to be praying into some key areas, but there is great reason to be rejoicing and to drink deep of hope. And so let's just start off with the successes we've been seeing. One of the big ones, we've been praying again and again for bloodless resolutions. And what that looks like is a lot of times is logistics being taken out. And the Ukrainian military took out another arsenal, another ammunitions depot, this time just outside in the Azotny region of Donetsk. And so praise God, because without bullets, nobody has to die. Nobody has to die, guys. The Russians don't have to die, the Ukrainians. Listen, as Russia is fighting to the end of its resources, this is great. Wouldn't it be wonderful if the guns stopped simply because they ran out of bullets to shoot the Ukrainians and so laid down their arms? In Mykolaiv, missiles were shot at Mykolaiv. Again, these aren't at civilian targets, kind of like Kharkov. They're shooting at people because they want to demoralize the people somehow. I mean, honestly, they can't expect a real result from it, and yet they do it, and they're wasting it. Maybe they're just trying to tell their higher-ups they're doing something, but the missile they shot at Mykolaiv was shot down this morning by missile systems. Then in Odessa, 2 different missiles, one headed for downtown and the other for that Zatoka bridge. Both of those were intercepted. Praise God. Again, that Zatoka bridge is so important for maintaining Ukrainian control and safety over the southwest region of the country. That's only accessible through that Zatoka bridge. And so again and again, Russia is running out of missiles. They are running out of supplies, and yet they're still trying to do something, anything. In Severodonetsk, the recent evaluation by the UK Defense Ministry said concentrated Russian artillery power paired with likely understrength infantry units remains insufficient to enable Russian advances within Severodonetsk. What that means is, what we've been saying is Russia has seemingly unlimited Soviet-era artillery and shells, and they're just firing at will constantly with no real ability for any kind of accuracy within about a half kilometer. They're just firing willy-nilly left, right, and center, but they don't have the troops to actually take the ground. And as I mentioned, right now there are no full BTGs, battalion tactical groups, in the area. Battalion tactical groups are 700, 800 troops, and all of them have been decimated. They're in tatters, they're in ruins, and so they can't take the ground. And that is huge, because again, pray those shells fall on empty places, they fall on places that don't matter, and that the 10,000 civilians that are still in the city are protected. And in Kharkov, the Russian troops unsuccessfully attempted a reconnaissance in force. I mean, it's kind of see if they could make some advance there in Rubizhna, but they were pushed back. So again and again and again, whatever the language is of Russia they will do it. They will do it. They can't. They don't. They're running out of resource. They're running out of soldiers. It's just the way it is. And praise God for these logistical breakdowns. Again, guys, as we moved over to this page, you'll see that your help is needed. As you share these, as you make your shares public, as you get the word out, it really helps us. Thank you, guys. But as I mentioned, the big story is in grain. The EU defense ministers are meeting right now, and the big discussion is over grain, because the world economy and real lives are at stake. Because Russia, again, as we've talked before, Russia and Ukraine make up 4% of all calories consumed, and very much higher percentage of calories consumed in the developing world. And that's corn and grain, and Russia is blocking it. They're blocking it hardcore, and they're trying to use it as blackmail. And Europe has recognized that. They're calling it out. Foreign Minister Joseph Borrell for the EU said, "We call on Russia to deblockade the ports. It is inconceivable. One cannot imagine that millions of tons of wheat remain unblocked in Ukraine while in the rest of the world people are suffering. This is a real war crime. So I cannot imagine that this will last much longer." And Germany's Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock said it supports Poland and Romania in adapting their railways to enable the export of millions of tons of grain stuck in Ukraine due to a Russian sea blockade. The rail tracks need to be modernized because they're different. The problem is that the different. It's hard to understand this, but there's different gauges, different widths of tracks in different countries. And so they have to, but they also different load bearing ranges. And so if it's just a passenger line, it can handle a little bit of weight. But to handle tons and tons of grain, it needs to be strengthened. And so there needs to be real modernization there. The railroad tracks need to be modernized. We need the right cargo wagons. The German government is working on this with many other actors. It is clear in the end, we will certainly not be able to get out all grain, but if we even just manage to free part of it on various routes, this will help as we are facing a global challenge. So what's really key here is three things. One, Russia is at fault. Russia has the ability to change it, but even if they don't, they're making real means to get the grain out. Praise God. This is for the sake of the entire world. Again, even if Russia, there were sanctions were thrown up and Russia was able to get the grain out, it would still leave the entire world held hostage by Russia, both for gas and for grain. And that's the other part, gas. As I mentioned, when in Thursday, when Chancellor Scholz and Prime Minister Draghi and President Macron showed up and ended up supporting Ukraine, Russia turned off their gas, turned it down, 25% for Germany, 15% for Italy. And the result is that Germany has said it will limit the use of natural gas for electricity production and increase its reliance on coal-fired power plants amid concerns, said, of shortages caused by Russia's cut. That's bitter, but in this situation, it's almost necessary to reduce gas consumption. Awesome. Come on. It's actually what Russia has inadvertently done is Germany was trying to hit a certain point by the end of September. Well, Russia has pushed them to move that plan up. In Austria, Austria's government has announced that it will reopen a mothballed coal power station because of power shortages, as well from those delivery of gas. That's, again, they have options. They're not fun options. They're hard options, but they're options. And they're actually being forced. Russia's attempts to blackmail them are backfiring and causing them to actually find those solutions. They claim they didn't have solutions. Well, they're finding them. Praise God. So actually, Russia's actually accelerating Europe's embargo. Also, China it's come in evidence. We've been talking about this. China's trying to have it both ways. Well, China has now made Russia their number one source for gas over top of Saudi Arabia. Wow. So that's huge. That's really big. That's really big. And that demonstrates something. And so pray that the governments of the world know how to respond to that in a meaningful way. One of the things China has not been able to figure out is they want to support Russia on an economic level, but they have limited ability to because their companies in China don't want to do business with Russia because of the risk of secondary sanctions around the world. And so China has limited means to help Russia, and them buying Russian gas on the cheap is one way that they can do that, but it's a very limited way. But it shows again where China's at in all of this. One other thing that's super huge is Many of you know that Putin is the richest man in the world. People talk about Elon Musk being on track to becoming a trillionaire. Putin is already a trillionaire. He and his friends have stolen unimaginable billions and billions and billions of dollars of assets. But it's been very hard to track it down. But they've actually found how he is storing them. There's a group called LLC Invest, and it is a super opaque, interconnected group of companies. They've located 86 companies so far that are part of this LLC Invest, and they'll be able to track this down. Why is this important? Because as we've been praying for a Daniel to come into the mix, those assets are a couple of things. One is they belong to the people. They've been stolen from the people. They've been stolen. Second of all, though, they are key parts of Russia's infrastructure. And so whoever comes into power has got to somehow get access to all of those, or they will disappear like so many of the Nazis' millions and bars of gold. And that would be horrible for Russia. So that's a huge breakthrough. It's so incredibly complicated and opaque, the system that they've set up, but they're finally uncovering it. That's a huge thing. Another piece is that Russian authorities are struggling to find legal means to punish military dissenters and those who refuse to mobilize from within the army, because the classification of the conflict in Ukraine is a special military operation. In other words, they are running out of people to recruit. They're running out of means to recruit. They're running out of people who are interested. And as a result, what's happening, it's also doing a self-fulfilling prophecy, is it's revealing how poorly managed the Russian military is, because they're not running it as a war. And as a result, people are even less likely to want to join or send their kids. Praise God. Continue to pray that that line of Russia turning this into a war never happens. But Putin has obviously identified that that's a red line he can't cross with the people, that the people just won't have it. So praise God, he's stuck in this catch-22. If he calls it a war, he can win it, but he'll lose Russia. And if he doesn't call it a war, he'll lose it. And so either way, he's in trouble. A couple of last things. One is referring to the POWs, particularly those, the Azovstal defenders. Many of them, as I've mentioned, well over 1,000 have been shipped to Russia. Particularly a couple of the two key leaders were sent to Russia. And they are planning for, by the end of August, to do tribunal trials in Donetsk People's Republic and in Russia. So why in the Donetsk People's Republic? They're trying to make them like they're the Nuremberg trials, but the reality is they're going to be shams. And so, but why in Donetsk People's Republic? Because there they have the death penalty. They don't have the death penalty in Russia. And as a result, they want to see these guys dead. In Russia, they're also looking to do this. So as a means, using these trials as a means to justify, to raise public sentiment for the war by creating these false narratives of denazification, of proving that these are just thugs or whatever. And so pray for those POWs. That they won't crack, that they won't participate in these sham trials, but also the reality is, at the end of the day, Russia really wants to hold on to these, the vast majority of these POWs, as means for negotiation at the end of the war, throughout the war. So pray for their safety, pray for their protection, but pray for these trials that are coming up. Final piece of truth coming through is the false flags. We're getting more and more intel that Russia is planning more and more false flag activity. They've been doing these random, weird, completely pointless bombings of villages in Bryansk and Belgorod, and then also in Donetsk. And so pray for the people to see through these. Pray for the international community to see through these false flag events. They will have zero effect in mobilizing the people, because the people of Donetsk and Lugansk, the people who've been occupied since 2014, have been have started to become restive and really pushing back, because their sons are being dragged off to a war they want no part in. And so pray that these false flag events are revealed for what they are. And so on to support. Support, Australia has come through with the first 4 of their 14 armored personnel carriers as part of their $285 million aid package. That's awesome. Another way that strange support is coming from within Russia. Dmitry Muratov, who's the 2021 Nobel Peace Prize winner for his work with the pro-democracy newspaper Novaya Gazeta in Moscow that was shut down in March. He is auctioning off his Nobel Peace Prize medal, and he's giving the money from it to the children affected by the war in Ukraine. There are people within Russia that are standing up. There are people in Russia who are brave. There are people who are not okay with this. Pray that there is an organizing influence within them. Pray that they can come together. And again, pray for Daniel to arise as a voice for righteousness, justice, and truth in the middle of Russia. Final piece is with support is you guys remember Macron. He went to Ukraine, and I've mentioned this. He did not want to back Ukraine. He did not because he's been in the fight with Marine Le Pen, who is the nationalist. It's the Rally National party. It's very much right, very much France for France party, and doesn't want to be involved in anything outside of France. And so he was realizing it. He knew that by supporting Ukraine, he could risk losing with the parliamentary elections that happened yesterday. And in fact, it has happened. I personally believe if he had boldly supported Ukraine, he would have gotten the support from other areas, but instead he lost horribly. He now has a minority, a small minority. His government, his coalition government, has a small minority of the French Parliament, and so this is huge. This is going to debilitate France and France's ability to meaningfully support Ukraine going forward. So pray into that situation that Macron is able to rebuild a larger coalition, but a coalition that's based on supporting Ukraine and actually being brave. Again, he did himself no favors by how weakly he supported Ukraine in the last week or so. Also within Italy, Mario Draghi, he also is facing huge problems within his party, within the ruling coalition he's set up. Particularly one of the largest groups, which is the Five Star Party, is going into open warfare within itself over the support of Ukraine. So pray for these governments to stand strong and to realize that being bold, being brave, standing with Ukraine is actually in their political vested interest, because that's why they do what they do, right? And so this is huge. These are big shifts. These are big shifts, and we need to keep praying for those. Wow. So a lot going on, maybe a lot of confusion. I really appreciate all the ways that you guys continue to share and get these out, but also that you continue to ask good questions. And hopefully later in the week we'll do another Q&A, but I've got good news. Tomorrow on our main Arise Life page, we're going to be doing a interview at noon, New York time, of Vladimir and Lilia, our friends and that we're partnering with the Church Благовестия and Good News in Dnipro. Again, I'm just the wave of excitement and passion and joy that is flooding into them. They've got a new, fresh wind. I don't know how you get a fresh wind after almost 120 days, 4 months of this, but they've gotten a fresh wind of passion and courage and energy and vision, and they're going to be sharing a lot of stories. They're going to be sharing a lot of what's actually happening, what they're seeing, how you can pray, what your gifts are doing. As I've said, we've sent, I want to say $174,000 to date to Ukraine. Praise God. Again, as you give those monies, we try to get those there as quickly as possible. Many of you have been giving through check. Those are being deposited as quickly as possible and being sent over. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And so if you want to give online, go to ariselife.org/help Ukraine, all one word, and there's a green button there, and just click there. It'll take you to our secure site, ariselife.churchcenter.com, and there you'll be able to give, and everything you give, even the transfer funds, we cover those so that 100% of what you give goes to Ukraine. But also, if you want to give by check, just mail a check to Arise Life Church at 2535 Hickory Grove Road, Suite 106, Ackworth, ACWORTH, Georgia 30101. And make sure the check is in the note field says Ukraine Relief Fund. We want to make sure those get there as quickly as possible. Thank you. But what are we praying for? What are we praying for today? We are praying particularly again for Severodonetsk. They continue to stand. Everyone's like, they're going. No, they are well secure in that Azot chemical plant. They're protecting hundreds of people who are hiding with them. Pray that Ukraine can continue to supply them. Russia's been pushing hard on that Bakhmut-Lysychansk highway, but Ukraine continues to push back. Russia's pushing back again in Tushkiva and trying to come around from that side of the Severodonetsk River. Pray that they are held on every side. And pray that the weapons can get there. Guys, pray that the West, as the defense ministers are meeting today, pray that those defense ministers actually agree to send heavy weapons. Theoretically, that's the big conversation they're supposed to be having. Pray that they decide to finally send, because up to date, they've only sent 10% of what's been asked. Pray, pray, pray. They need those tanks. They need those guns. They need them quickly. And people are going to, it's counterintuitive, but people are going to die as long as Russian guns can continue to fire. And so those guns need to be taken out, and they can if Ukraine receives the support they need. So pray, rather than just the 6 Caesar guns, they need 1,000. They need 1,000 howitzers, and so pray those come. Pray what they're waiting on, the tanks come. Pray for that. There's no reason at this point for Europe to hold back, because they're all in at this point. So that's a huge prayer. The third, so Severodonetsk, praying for weapons, and also pray for Kherson. So the Ukrainian troops have been pressing bit by bit towards Kherson, and they're now within sight. They can see the tops of apartment buildings in Kherson. So they are getting close, and they are getting within artillery range. Pray that Kherson would fall bloodlessly, right? City warfare is evil, and it's evil for the occupants particularly. Pray that they are able to do a couple things. One, there's we mentioned this before, there's 2 or 3 bridges across the Dnieper there, that if they took those 3, they could just basically take all of the Kherson region on that side of the Dnieper. So pray that for some bloodless resolutions there, because the people of Kherson are suffering. They are suffering unbelievably under Russian occupation. That's why we're grateful for Vladimir and Lilia for being able to take